Welcome to this explainer. So today we're diving into Cardano, and I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you're tasked with building a highly efficient, futuristic metropolis completely from scratch. You wouldn't just, start pouring concrete at random, right? You'd need a really strict, mathematically verified blueprint. Well, in the digital space, that's exactly what Cardano is. It's a third-generation blockchain that was meticulously built from the ground up using peer-reviewed science and evidence-based methods. Here's the blueprint for today's explainer. We're going to cover origins in the trilemma, our power grid Ouroboros, the dual-layer and eUTXO infrastructure, the 5 eras of construction, the Voltaire governance handover, and finally, scaling and real-world utility. Let's get right into it. Section 1. Origins and the trilemma. Okay, let's dive into this. The project was actually conceived back in 2015 by Ethereum co-founder Charles Hoskinson. After leaving Ethereum, he basically realized that building a truly global financial operating system was going to require a radically different approach. Because of that, Cardano really stands out. It's the very first blockchain developed strictly from a foundation of peer-reviewed academic research. Before a single line of code is even written, the underlying concepts are mathematically proven by top academic and cryptographic experts. Now, you might be wondering, what's the point of all that rigorous research? Well, the explicit goal was to solve what we call the blockchain trilemma. This is the incredibly tough challenge of building a network that is massively scalable, rock-solid secure, and completely decentralized all at the exact same time. Early networks, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they really struggled to balance all three of these. So Cardano's architects literally made solving this trilemma their primary mission. Moving on to Section 2, the power grid, also known as Ouroboros. So traditional proof-of-work systems, think Bitcoin, rely on these huge energy-draining mining rigs that constantly compete to solve puzzles. And hey, it works, but it literally consumes the energy of a small country. Cardano completely replaces this with Ouroboros Proof-of-Stake. Ouroboros was actually the first mathematically verified proof-of-stake mechanism ever. It gives you those rigorous security guarantees you need, but it does it while being up to 4 million times more energy efficient than Bitcoin. It's a massive difference. Which leads us to a pretty great question. How do you actually validate transactions securely without burning through all that electricity? Well, the Ouroboros protocol does it by dividing time into what it calls epochs and slots. Think of it kind of like a continuous rolling lottery. The network randomly selects nodes to act as slot leaders, and your staked ADA token, that acts as your lottery ticket. The more ADA a pool holds, the higher its chance of being chosen to validate a block and earn rewards. And the really brilliant part is that it requires barely any computing power at all, and your ADA stays totally liquid. Absolutely no lockup periods. All right, Section 3, infrastructure. We're looking at the dual layer and eUTXO. Instead of forcing everything to run down one single, congested highway, Cardano splits its network into 2 distinct parallel layers. First, you have the Cardano settlement layer, or CSL. You can think of this as the express lane. It is optimized purely for processing ADA token transfers and just keeping the ledger balanced. Then you have the Cardano computation layer, the CCL. This operates totally independently to execute those complex smart contracts. Splitting it up like this means your heavy decentralized apps aren't going to accidentally jam up the core transaction ledger. And this brings us to a massive difference in how transactions are actually handled here, especially when you compare it to Ethereum. Ethereum uses a global account model, which is a bit like a messy, constantly updating shared bank ledger. Cardano uses the extended UTXO, or eUTXO model. Think of eUTXO exactly like handing over physical cash at a store and getting exact change back. Because these transactions are discrete and independent, you know your exact transaction fee before you even hit send. And the absolute best part? If a transaction happens to fail, you aren't charged a single dime for it. 0 wasted gas fees, no unpleasant surprises. It's a real game changer. Let's look at Section 4, construction and the 5 eras. Cardano's development actually breaks down into 5 very distinct developmental eras. It all started with Byron, which just established the basic foundation and launched the network. Then came Shelley, which fully decentralized things and brought staking online. Next up was Goguen, and that introduced smart contracts using the Plutus and Marlowe languages. Right now we're moving through Basho, which is entirely focused on scaling and optimizing the network. And finally, Voltaire, which is the ultimate era. Now, this methodical, step-by-step approach might have felt a bit slow to some folks at first, but it guaranteed a foundation secure enough to protect literally billions of dollars in value. Section 5, the handover. Let's talk about Voltaire governance.
So you've probably heard a lot of chatter about the Chang and Plomin hard forks happening between 2024 and 2025. I need you to know these aren't just your standard software updates. They represent a fundamental paradigm shift for the network. They officially usher in the Voltaire era by using a framework called CIP 1694. And why does this matter to you? Well, because it permanently shifts total control of the entire Cardano blockchain away from its founding entities, like IOG and the Cardano Foundation, and hands the keys directly over to the community.
Governance is now driven by this incredible digital voting booth system, and it's supported by three main pillars: delegated representatives, or DREPs, the Constitutional Committee, and stake pool operators. Basically, if you hold ADA, you literally have a voice. You can vote directly on protocol changes and treasury funding, or if you prefer, you can just delegate your voting power to a DREP to represent your interests for you. It's true, fully on-chain democratic power.
Section 6. Scaling and real-world utility.
To scale up from mass global adoption, Cardano is deploying some genuinely incredible tech. First, there's Hydra, which is a Layer 2 solution allowing for off-chain transactions with near-instant finality. Then we have Mithril, enabling blazing-fast node syncing. But the absolute game-changer coming up on the horizon is the Ouroboros Leios upgrade. Leios literally decouples the act of validating a transaction from the process of block ordering, and what that does is unlock massive parallel scaling right there on the base layer. 10,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. With this Ouroboros Leios upgrade, Cardano's base consensus layer could potentially catapult from processing around 20 transactions per second right now, all the way up to between 1,000 and 10,000 transactions per second. I mean, that is exactly the kind of massive throughput you need to run global financial systems without skipping a single beat. And the cool part is that throughput isn't just some theoretical lab experiment, it's driving actual real-world utility today. Take Atala PRISM, for example. It's Cardano's decentralized identity solution, and it's already been deployed in this massive partnership with Ethiopia's Ministry of Education. The goal there is to secure digital academic credentials for millions of students and teachers. This is what it means to actually bank the unbanked and provide verifiable identity to the people who need it the most. And fueling all of this real-world utility is a total explosion in DeFi liquidity. When we look at Cardano's rapidly growing stablecoin market mix, fiat-backed options like USDCx are dominating at 45%, sitting right alongside USDM, USDA, and the formerly verified over-collateralized JED. Cardano is actively building deep, institutional-grade liquidity right now, and these stable assets are exactly the fuel you need to power complex decentralized finance, global lending, and real-world asset tokenization. So to wrap up our explainer for today, Cardano is clearly far more than just another cryptocurrency to day trade. It is a robust, research-backed financial operating system. It was meticulously engineered to be secure enough to protect billions of dollars, environmentally sustainable enough to last for generations, and most importantly, entirely owned and governed by its own community. Which leaves us with one final thought to ponder. If a blockchain can be successfully built like a meticulously planned, sustainable digital city and governed entirely by its own citizens without any middlemen, are our traditional centralized financial systems already completely obsolete? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you on the next one.